Hey everybody, General Scar here, and I am working on a new prototype right now for a game just during the summer while I wait for school to start. Started working on this a few days ago, and I'm excited because things are working and I'm making some progress. So, this is gonna be like a idle game that I'm sort of prototyping. Um, and right now I'm just sort of working on the inventory system. So I went through a few different sort of uh, things. I don't know, like a few videos. Like one video that I watched that I used like a lot of the same kind of code and stuff for this. I'll link that in the description because it's a pretty good tutorial, and it's if you need something, it's like an inventory system where you can like drag and drop items and add items, and there's like empty slots and stuff like that. And so I modified a lot of that to fit with what I figured would be a lot easier to work with because I didn't understand how it really worked at all at the time. It's kind of complicated, but um, this doesn't because like for this it doesn't need to be drag and drop. There's going to be certain items, and I'm just going to have like a list of all the items separated into different categories that you can go to. So like for example, you're like gathering wood and then gathering ore, and then there's going to be like the uh, processed items. So you'd have like a section that's all just like wood items. It's like this would be normal wood and like oak wood and then like maple wood or something, and then there'd be like an ore section which would be like iron, coal, whatever kind of other ore there is. Uh, and yeah, so it doesn't need to be drag and drop. So I sort of modified it to fit my needs. And this is what it looks like, and it might not be that interesting or impressive right now because it doesn't really do anything yet, but you can see that it changes when it spawns. It changes the item, um, what's it called, the sprite, and then it also changes the number here, the amount, to certain values when you start it. So I'm just going to be going over a lot of the basics of this. A lot of it will be covered in the tutorial video for the inventory, which I will link in the description, because it's like a 5 or 6 episode long thing, and they're like 10 to 20 minute long videos, so there's a lot of a lot of content. But basically, we have our item database here, which is constructing an item database. So this is the list of every item we have in the game, and this is being constructed based off this JSON file here. So we have all our items here with our titles and things like that. So we have a title. I should point this out. It has ID, title, and the slug here. The stackable we don't use. I don't use. This was just from the thing. I just don't want to go through and delete them all because I'm lazy. So we have the ID, which is going to be, ID of it, and we have the slug, which is also going to be used to reference these items, which makes it a lot easier because we can, if we reference everything via the slug instead of the ID, we can rearrange this list later. And since we're referencing stuff based off just this slug, the slug is just this string, which is unique to that item. So if we reference just that while we're calling and setting things, then we can rearrange this list later so it makes more sense. So like we can put items in different sections and stuff like that, and everything will still work. As far as I understand, I'm pretty sure. We can actually try this out right now, hang on. So if I change this to feather, and I change this to arrow shaft, so what should happen, everything else isn't really that important. The two items should be flipped over here, so yeah. So this is the feather. I know it's a scroll, I'm too lazy to rename stuff, and this is the arrow shaft, which is a bow. So before these two were flipped, now they flip, so we can rearrange this list that we have here later at any time we want. So it, oh, I can't type. Makes more sense, and as long as we keep the IDs in this order, everything's going to be fine. Because also the way that we're sort of listing them out is each inventory slot here has an ID assigned to it. So this is slot 0, so it has ID of 0. Slot 1 has ID of 1. Slot 2 has ID of 2. So every time that like this loads, slot 0 is going to get the item with the ID of 0 is how I have this set up. So slot 0 is always going to have coins because that's the 0 ID. So that's what that's going to be. We could, like, I could change this to 2. I don't, how is this going to work? Hang on. This might just duplicate it. Yeah, so this has an ID of 2 now. So now it shows the ID, the item at the ID of 2, which is the scroll picture. And so we have our database, and this is all based off these items. It's an item class that contains the ID, the title, the slug, the amount, and the sprite. Now the amount is how many of the item there are, and the sprite is the image that it is. And so for the sprite, we have it be just a sprite in our resources folder here, named the same thing as the slug of the item. So we reference our slug here. So this dot slug equals slug, just so we can reference this. Blah blah blah. Sorry. Yeah. So the slug of this item equals the slug we put in here when we're creating the item, which happens up here in the item database. It loops through and gets all the information from the JSON file and creates and adds all these items to a list of inv items, so inventory items, adds it to a list. So then we get this list of all the items in the game ordered by ID that is we can reference later, and we can change items, certain things in the list, and it will change it later in the stuff as well. So if we have a certain item at an ID, we can change that specific item's value of something. So we'd only really be changing the amount of the item, so we can add or remove stuff later. And then the sprite again uses a slug to reference the item in the resources sprites folder, so that we can assign it to that specific thing, which is pretty neat. Okay, and then what else do we have? So I have like 2 prototypes here. So some of these scripts, like this one is item database. This is the original sort of code for the drag and drop inventory system. This is the item database 2, which is the prototype version 2, which is what we're doing. So I've renamed some of these to work with different things. So I think we have slot item and inv slot are our other ones. Yeah. So we have our inventory slot. This just has an ID that we can set the slot to, so we can, you know, just make the slot ID what we need it to be. This could be added onto slot item. Might make it a little bit easier. I might do that later. I don't know, but we'll see. Okay, so, and then everything else is on slot item here. So we have the list, we have the whole list of all the items in the game ordered by ID. And so with this, we take the ID of the slot above us. We use a method find item by ID, which is here, which gives us the item, the inv item. We return that, so we have that specific item and we can do something with it. And we assign it to this item thing so we can reference it later. And then we change the sprite to be the sprite which is assigned to the item. So we have the correct sprite of the item. And then we change the amount here to the item, the amount of the item. So that way it has the correct, it shows the correct value, and we change the text to be that. So slot 1, or slot 0 I guess, goes through, it finds the item of ID 0, or for the slot item, and it assigns that to this. It assigns, basically, I guess, references, we can later reference that item specifically on this slot item. It's kind of confusing. And then we can change values and we can reference values. So we reference the sprite that we've assigned to that one when we created it based off of the slug name. And so all the images down here are named the same thing as the slugs so that the correct item gets the correct picture. And then it assigns that picture to it. And then it assigns the amount here, the text thing. It assigns that to the amount of the item that it is in the item that we're referencing. So do this. And it makes this list automatically. And we can, so slot 4 is ID 4. It has the information of item 4 on this list, which would be an iron bar, but we don't have the sprite for it. So we don't have an iron bar sprite down here. So it doesn't assign the picture correctly. So it's just a white square, which is fine. We just need to put in a image folder. Let's actually do that really quick. I just have some stuff here. So we'll have, let's do this. Actually, I need to open this in the Explorer. Hold on. And we'll rename this to, I just hit delete. Oopsies. Hold on. This is on my other monitor. Iron bar. Okay. So this is what we did. So we had this sword and we renamed it iron_bar. And now it should update in here. And now if we hit play, there's our iron bar, which is a sword. But, you know, this is just placeholder stuff right now. But the inventory system works, so we can reference. So later, right now I don't have this stuff written out. This took enough of my brain power. We can reference the item amounts later so that we can add item amounts. We can check them for like crafting stuff. So if you want like 5 iron ore to make an iron bar, we hit like the craft button, and then it checks if, so, okay, so this is the thing, right? So we also have find slug. No, we're gonna have find item by slug. We're gonna have something. Yeah, it's probably gonna be like find item by slug. So it's gonna be similar to the ID thing, but instead of putting the ID, we put in the string of the slug. So we just type in like iron ore. So if we want to check if we have iron ore, we check the amount of iron ore. So we get the item of the slug, iron ore, and then we check the amount of that. And then if it's as much as we want, we subtract that amount and then add another item as well. And then that's all the crafting stuff. And then gathering stuff, we can just like add stuff, whatever. And that's, yeah. So that's gonna be that's gonna be in the future, because this is all I have so far. But it's funny, every time I make one of these videos, I feel like I've done so much work, and I've just done a lot, and then like I start recording and it's like, oh, hold on, there's not that much to talk about, I guess. But I'm trying to make it, I mean, there's probably more than I'm letting on. I'm sure this is really confusing if you don't know what this is, because the first time I did this, it was very confusing, and I went back and remade it with the second prototype. Then I sort of understand it better. But like, there's just a lot of systems, and this get set stuff is still kind of new to me, so a lot of this is sort of just copy pasted, and it works, so I use it. And it's but yeah, if you want a more, I guess, the tutorial that I use for these inventory stuff is going to be in the description. I wouldn't say that it's more detailed. He just sort of like writes the code line by line, I guess, and if you go back and try and understand it later, then you'll probably get it. But he doesn't really explain everything in detail. But he gives you the code, and it works for the most part. There's like a few things that are probably a little weird, I'm not sure. But yeah, that's it for this. So once I get progress, the next thing I'm going to be working on is gathering. So there's going to be like a bar that goes up, and then when that bar reaches the end, you get a certain item. And then after that, it's probably going to be crafting, and then there's going to be some more complex background stuff. And then after that, we'll just wait until that point to figure it out, because I don't know how far off that's going to be. But that's going to be it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions about this kind of stuff, please leave like a comment in the description. Please leave a comment down below. I'd be more than happy to try and answer this stuff. I'm still fairly new to Unity and C#. I've only been doing this for about, I don't know, 6 months now or something like that. But if I can answer a question, I'd be more than happy to if you have any. So, yeah. That's going to be it for this video.